Welcome to the Productpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Jalarzak, product development and marketing coach and mom of three. Learn from and get inspired by women entrepreneurs killing it in the product space. Each episode, we will share the latest trends, proven strategies, and inside secrets of the product world, all designed to give you greater confidence to create your own success through a product venture. Let's do this. Have you ever met someone who has a heart of gold and a magnetic presence that just attracts awesomeness? I had the pleasure of meeting Tiana Fech in a mastermind group. I had already followed her podcast and thought of reaching out to her, but I waited. For those of you who are waiting to make asks, just do it. Anyway, fortunately, we were in the same group and she made me feel instantly at ease. And so I finally asked her to be on the show and pitched myself for hers. Before we move on with the show, I'll share a listener review. This one is from Mindful Mixie. Such a great podcast. I hired Nicole as my product development coach and my experience was amazing. She guided and supported me the whole way through the creation of my product and I couldn't have done it without her. She really knows her stuff and this podcast is so unique in the product development field. Definitely take a listen. Totally worth it. Well, thank you so much, Mindful Mixie, from the bottom of my heart. I love reading reviews, but more than that, I love that it helps people find the show and get inspiration for their own business. If you're listening, please take a few seconds to jump on Apple Podcasts through your iTunes account, click on ratings and reviews, and add a review. It only takes a minute, and you'll be sending some good vibes into the world. But first, this episode is brought to you by my online course, The Product Pathway. Have you always dreamt of creating a product of your own, but you have no idea where to start? Do you think up solutions to problems and wonder why no one else has thought of them? Do you want to hop on the fast-growing e-commerce boom? There's never been a better time to launch a product business. Well, I've got something exciting for you. My 6-week course, The Product Pathway, is back this January. It's a starter course and group coaching program that gets you from product idea or no idea to a validated concept, business plan, and prototype. I created this course specifically for aspiring product entrepreneurs who want to launch a product and need help to get their idea off the ground. Because let's face it, getting started can be the hardest part. There is no better time to give your dreams a path. January is the start of new beginnings, and this could be yours. Book a discovery call with me to see if it's a fit for you, or you can sign up directly through the link in the show notes. Here's some of the amazing feedback I've had on the course. Nicole's expertise in the product development industry has taught me how to identify and validate my product ideas, how to confidently work through the stages and gates of product development, clarify my brand identity, and write a business plan for success. The course material is very comprehensive, so I'd recommend it to anyone that has a product idea that requires guidance, or to anyone that is considering adding physical products to an established business or service. This is from Elle from New Zealand. Thank you so much, Elle. I'm so honored to have had you in my course, and you are seriously a star student. Now back to the show. Tiana Fech is a Calgary mom of 3 kiddos, age 14, 12, and 9, who believes that motherhood truly takes a village and who values sharing stories, experiences, and ideas and being real about all things motherhood. She's an educator with 16 years of experience in a variety of capacities, including developing curriculum, teaching science, working in inclusive education, and now working as a sessional instructor at the University of Calgary. She is a co-author in the best-selling book, You've Got This, Boss Mama, and is the host of the Part-Time Jungle podcast, which creates conversation and community about swinging motherhood and work in a way that works best for us and our families. Tiana is launching her Mastering Your Motherhood Jungle online course this month, and this is a course for busy moms to learn how to untangle the vines and swing through motherhood and work with flying colors. I'm so excited to have Tiana on the show. I'm sure you're going to love her as much as I do, and I just think that this whole balancing work life and motherhood is truly a jungle. So I would love to hear from the expert herself. So welcome to the show, Tiana.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited for you to be here. Thank you. Now, we met in a sort of a mastermind group that we're a part of. And I had also been following your journey because I had already seen your podcast and I'd been listening to your podcast. So I just, I don't think you knew that actually.
No,
I was
that's so
secretly
lovely.
following you. And I've always thought that your message and your mission really resonates with moms like me who have always tried to balance this whole motherhood and having a business or a career sort of life. And so I'd love to hear about how you came to this journey of uncovering this need for your business. And what is it that brought you to start writing in this book and also creating a podcast to help moms?
Well, long story short, I think as with many things, it really started with my own personal experience. So before becoming a mom, I had this idea in my head, I think, of what motherhood would be like, and maybe also how would work would fit into that. And I became a mom and I kind of felt like things sort of unraveled for me. It just in so many ways wasn't what I expected, like in both wonderful ways and challenging ways. And I just couldn't wrap my head around going back to work full time. But I just found in general there wasn't a lot of conversation, and I know part of it was as a first-time mom, you're sort of figuring all the things out, but I didn't really have anyone to talk to about motherhood and work, like really get real about that conversation and how people were really feeling about it for themselves. And in my mind, just looking out around me, it seemed like everybody seemed very confident in their choice and in their journey and path. So some moms were like, I'm staying home full time, or other moms were saying, I'm returning to work full time. And I'm thinking, I don't think either of those options work for me. So what am I going to do? And so on my own, with some conversations with close friends and family, I started to find that option for me that worked best, that was somewhere in the middle. And what ended up working out beautifully was a mom who taught at the same school as me had had her baby 20 hours before me. So we were in the hospital, same hospital at the same time. And we ended up doing a job share together. So one of us taught for half the day while the other two looked after the two kids. And then at lunch, we switched. And it worked out really well. We had to convince our school principal that this was a good idea and get people on board with us. But it really paved the way for me looking at carving my own path or blazing my own trail with motherhood and work in a way that worked for me. So my journey sort of continued, but what I found is that I wasn't the only mom feeling the way that I was, and other moms were actually sort of looking at ways to make that juggle work better for them. So once I started having those conversations with people and getting a little bit more vulnerable and talking about how I was feeling, others started to share their stories too. So I really wanted to create a place and a space for that discussion to happen. And that led to an opportunity to share my story and perspective in the book You've Got This Mama, and then led me to creating the podcast as well as another way to kind of create that space and place for that conversation, and ultimately to build a sense of community. Because I think the big thing all of us are looking for is that connection and to feel like it's not just me and I'm not the only one. So that's essentially how it all came to be.
Oh, I think so many people can relate to that, and they may not talk about it, but I found that too when I was thinking about going back to work. I just could not fathom leaving my baby. So that's what led me to start my business. And I think a lot of moms kind of figure out a different path after having kids because of that pull towards balancing family life and also just wanting to give, I don't know, use their brain or give back to the community or whatever it is that they want to do as well as being a mom. So it's such a great thing that you've developed this community and this resource for moms to listen to. And so you started the Part-Time Jungle podcast. Why did you launch this podcast?
So, another big part of it that I really felt is I feel like in general, we tend to categorize things, right? It just makes things easier to understand. But, really, do any of us fit neatly in any sort of box? And I just felt now I'm a more, I guess, experienced mom. Our oldest being 14, and that I've had some time to reflect on things and that, but I really found people have such strong opinions about all things related to motherhood, including motherhood and work. And there are people who feel very strongly that one way is actually better than other ways. And so, what I wanted to do with the podcast was to share my own thoughts and feelings and experiences, but also to bring in those stories from other moms and their lived experiences and their struggles and successes and the things that they learned along the way and the things that helped them along the way, so that we could see really, like, ultimately, no matter what way we swing it, we do share a lot in common. And there isn't this one best perfect way out there. We need to find the way that works best for us and our own families. And some of that is circumstantial. Some of that is the ages and stages of our kids, but there isn't this right way. And some of the things that I've heard people say are just, I don't think it's meant to be, you hope it's not meant to be ill-intentioned, but it can be so hurtful because it's very vulnerable to be sort of working through these things as a mom and trying to figure things out. But I've had a mom say things like, oh, those stay-at-home moms, hanging out at the gym all day in their Lululemon clothes. And I think, that can be a very hurtful comment, and it's hard to know what to say or respond to that. Or, if people choose to go back to work full time, your kids are only little for so long. Like, do you really need to go back to work when they're small? And you think that's so that's so hard. And even personally, from myself, when I got my job at the university, I just felt so incredibly proud because this is like a dream come true job for me. I love mentoring and supporting student teachers. And beautifully, it was part-time, and it had some flexibility to it, and it was going to work really well for our family. So I just felt fantastic. And in connecting with some of the other people at the university, I had somebody ask me what I was teaching, and I shared what I was doing. So supervising student teachers, and then I was also teaching another course as well. And when I shared that, they sort of paused and looked at me and said, so what else are you doing? And so it just felt like in their eyes, it felt like it wasn't enough, right? And I think if we're creating that conversation and that sense of community, and we're sharing our stories and we're talking about those feelings, right? Like, those are really hard and difficult things to experience. Like, motherhood is tough enough as it is without all those other people's opinions and things. It can be quite hurtful.
Oh, for sure. And I don't think there's even a perfect way to do it. Like, I personally always have feelings of guilt in any situation I'm in, whether I'm working full time, I'm not spending enough time with my family. If I am focusing on my kids, then I'm not bringing in income for my family. Like, there's always that pull of, yeah, I just think it's such an interesting conversation, and it's wonderful that you're showing people that there's just no one way to do it, that your way is the best way. Whatever you find that is right for you is the way you can do it. Now, personally, I need something else. Sometimes I felt guilt, like, why do you need something else? Aren't your kids enough for you? Why do you need something extra? But it's just a personal decision for everyone. So I love that you bring this conversation to the forefront. It's amazing. Now, what do moms come to you for? What do you find since you've started your podcast? Are they, coming to you for advice? Are they new moms or a mom at any stage? Like, what are you finding?
I find that it's kind of all everything and in between, but oftentimes it's when moms are sort of looking to make some sort of a change. So they're really sensing and feeling the overwhelm. They're feeling like something just isn't working and feeling right. The mom guilt, like you were talking about, for sure is a big part of it. And just that question, like, how can I find that balance? And I know for some people that word can evoke all
Right.
kinds of
Yes.
emotions. And I know for myself, there's definitely times where I feel more balanced than others, but I tend to use the word juggle because it's just finding that way to make all the moving parts and pieces in your own work life, family life, however it looks, work for you, right? And so I would say those are sort of the main things. They're just looking for finding a way to shift things or change things in small ways, or maybe in a bigger way, just to make things fit and work better.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a time when we reach out to other people when we need that extra support. And sometimes you just can't talk to family or friends about it. You need someone external to give you some advice or just be there to listen to you because there's no judgment at that point. And so you've created this village of support for moms, which is so beautiful. So could you tell us how in your mind can a village mentality help in times of change or uncertainty?
Yeah, so there's sort of four main ways. Like this is something I think about a lot because my village makes all the world of difference for me with my juggle. It's a huge part of that. So the first one I would say is just that comfort in knowing that you are not alone. Because I think sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in our own situation and how we're feeling or what our kids are doing or not doing or struggling with, and all of those things. And it feels like it's just us and it can't possibly be anyone else because we look on social media and we see these beautiful photos and these smiling faces, and it's a bit of a highlight reel, right? And it's not necessarily the whole story. So I think it really just helps you to feel like it's not just me. I'm not the only one. And along with that, it just gives you that perspective, right? It then normalizes things a little bit, like, having a teenager and some of the challenges that go along with that as they're sorting things out and trying to find their own way. Or maybe with little ones like sleep regressions, for example, or those tantrums in the grocery store that we may have experienced. So it just gives you that perspective, or even the mistakes that we make as a mom. And so one of the things on the podcast is I ask moms to share a mommy mess up. So like a learning experience or something that they've had, because we've all had them. I've had so many. And you're not the most horrible person in the world at all. We all have these things happen to us. And then there's also that opportunity to give and accept support. So, like as a new mom, I was horrible at accepting help. People would offer, and I'd say, oh, no, like I'm fine. For whatever reason, I felt like I just had to do everything myself. And so it's the giving and the receiving. And I've certainly got better at that. And I think people appreciate, I know I do, the opportunity to give and receive support with people in my village. And then just also finding joy in the journey, because motherhood can be like incredible. It's so rewarding and wonderful. It can also be very challenging and tough. And there's like those ebbs and flows. And I think it's nice to have people that you can laugh with until your stomach and your face hurt, and that you can share special memories and moments with and kind of go through the journey with together.
Those are such great tips. And definitely I can resonate with the idea of accepting support because we all say that, oh, I'm fine or whatever, but there's so much joy in that person giving it to us. So I'm trying to be more aware of that when people say offer help, is just to receive it and say thank you, just like receiving compliments, I guess. Now, with the work that you do, you tell stories with your podcast and you have resources that have attracted your audience. So in work and in motherhood, how can storytelling foster connection and help build a community?
Yeah, so I think for me, like storytelling is really about getting real and being a bit vulnerable. So I think it really fosters connection because it really facilitates that sense of that normalizing that perspective and knowing that you're not alone and that you're in it together. So I think sharing those wonderful moments that we have with our kids, but also those tough days, right? When somebody asks you if you're fine and you're not, saying that you're not and talking about it, and maybe sharing that story of kind of what's going on for you in that moment. I think it's very powerful and such an incredible force of connection. And, then there's also those creating those stories is a big part of it as well. So when I think about, like my village of support, we have these incredible stories that we've sort of created together, like with traditions and celebrations that we've had. So, I mean, COVID's put a little bit of a damper on our traditions, but those are part of the story. And it's interesting, one thing. So we have an amusement park near Calgary called Callaway Park, and every year there's three families. We take our kids and we've long story short, there was sort of a competition that started on one of the rides. It's a log ride that you go down these hills and splash in the water on this log. So it ended up being that over the years, so there was an adult mom team and then a kid team, and there were costumes involved, and they were trying to get the best sort of pose because there's a photograph taken as you go down the hill. So there was judging and planning and everything that kind of was a part of that. Well, this year we didn't go to Callaway Park, so there wasn't going to be any log ride photo competition. But you know what? The kids, this is such an important part of their story, like of our friendship and our journey, that tradition. They full on snuck off to the park and created a log ride photo.
No way.
Yeah. And so, anyways, we ended up sort of doing the competition in our own way. But I think, creating those memories, sharing those experiences, being vulnerable, and it's such a great way to just learn and grow in general, right? We can reflect on ourselves, we can be inspired by other stories. So I think it's such a powerful tool for sure.
For sure. I love that. I'm trying to think of the stories that we create at our house, but anyway, nothing as interesting as the log one, that's for sure. Another thing I want to ask about, we talk about balance, and I don't like to use that word because I know that there's no true balance, but people are looking for help with time management. And so what is the number one thing that you'd advise women when juggling work and motherhood? And also, how can, if, getting clear on what they truly value help them?
Yeah. And I think that's just it, right? Like, I think just getting really clear on the things that matter the most to us, because time is precious and limited. We only have so many hours in our day, in our weeks. And we really need to, I think, get clear on those priorities. So, one thing I like to think of is about our family's core values, for example. So, for our family, three that really stand out to me are relationships. Like, we really value relationships with family and friends and investing time and energy in those. We really value experiences over things. So creating those memories and doing silly things like the log ride competition and camping and traveling, and that's important for us. And then another one would be accountability. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. That's how we learn. But we need to own the consequence, positive or negative, of the choices that we make. So those things are very important to us. So for every family, that's going to look a little bit different. Also, there might be more on the list or less, or whatever it looks like for your family. But I find it really just creates a sense of calm in the chaos of motherhood, because it helps with what I say yes to and what I say no to, for example, because saying no can be very tricky as a mom. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the struggle continues. But when I am asked to volunteer for something else, I can look at my calendar, for example, and I can see what's going on. And if I say yes to that, what is that going to take away as far as our family and what's important to us? Like, is it going to take away from a special experience or some time together that we had planned? Is it going to prevent me from spending the time with the friends and family that are really important to me? So it can make saying no just a little bit easier, and then recognizing the things that I want to take yes to. So it creates that intentionality and what to make time and space for and what to prioritize. So I know for myself, when I look at my family calendar and I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm feeling scattered or frazzled, I'll look and I'll see that we haven't created the space and time for those things that are important. So we're not connecting with family and friends in a meaningful way. We're not making space and time for those family experiences that we want to have. And even with accountability, like, that requires time, right? That time to connect with your kids and have those meaningful conversations. So if I look at our calendar and I don't see those things there, it matches with how I'm feeling inside. And I know when I am intentional, and I have a friend who lives on the other side of the city, and she's actually fantastic at really taking initiative at this. But, making a point of connecting with those special friends every month or two, for example, right? Or being intentional about someone. Like today, I hadn't talked with a mom that I know in a while. So we walked home from school drop off together. So we had a moment to connect. So I think just putting that intention behind those things that are really important to us can help us just feel more calm and more aligned and less chaotic.
Right, because you're deliberate about your choices you're making. You don't feel like you're just reacting to everybody else's requests, which I think can be easy for us to do. Now, how do you set those values? Do you sit around a table and you talk to your kids and you jointly say these are our values, or do you set them yourself and or with your husband? Like, how do you do that?
Well, I would say like my husband and I have done more of the discussing in the past, and some of them truthfully have just kind of come to light, like through our lived experiences, right? And then we've sort of talked about them after the fact. We're being more intentional, I would say, as of late, and I would say that would be like a positive with COVID that came of it is more conversations actually, and one-on-one conversations with our kids. I've really made a point of having, because they've all been going through some different emotions and stuff through this time, about the things that are important to our family. So I think it's something we've always done, but we've gotten more intentional about it lately. One mom that I spoke to for an upcoming podcast episode, she actually posts their family's core values in their home.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I thought that was very interesting, like just to have that visual anchor, right, in those
Hmm.
moments. But I do think in becoming more intentional, I look back and I think we have been using sort of the same language, because I don't know about in your household. We have kids with similar ages, but sometimes they mention things like in other families or so and so's family, or, and I can say, but in our family, like this is what's most important to us. And so because they know that language, and because I talk about it all the time, they remind me of that. They're like, we know. um, yeah, so they can appreciate that. So they're more now an active part of that discussion, I would say, which is nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's so great. And that just reminds me, we used to have family meetings, which we would sit around the table. There would be a note taker. There'd be like someone has the talking stick and all that kind of stuff. I remember I got this from a parenting coach and it was so brilliant. So I'm going to bring that back and talk about values. I love that. And so once women become moms, I find that often their perspective changes and then they seek more the flexible working arrangements. They even think about starting a business, which gives them the flexibility. So, what would you advise moms who are looking for something totally different, like launching a business?
Yeah. So I think the big thing is, because motherhood's so busy and we've got all the things, it can be easier not to make a change. In a way, it's easier to kind of stay where we are, because it involves getting vulnerable, stepping outside of our comfort zone. It takes energy to do things different, right? We kind of get into a routine or a groove. So the big thing I would say is to put it out in the world. Start talking about it. So maybe you start talking about it with somebody that you're very comfortable with. And through conversation, I think it helps you get even more clear on what the really important pieces of what you're interested are, or what some steps might be that you could take to kind of get you headed in that new or different direction, or a resource that you could take a look at, or like a podcast that you could listen to, or someone else that you could have a conversation with. I think about my own experience. So I resigned from the school board here in Calgary. It just, as for me as a mom, wasn't working, and all the mom guilt and all the thing, like how many moms are teachers? There are many, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't working for me. So I decided to step away and see what else I could do. I had gone back to university and done my master's degree, and I just felt like maybe there's something else out there that would just be a better fit for me. Well, I started talking about my dream and what I hoped for. And actually, through my master's degree, I met a man just through a random phone call that helped me with my big project for my master's. He invited me to be on a committee with the Alberta government, but he was one of the many people I talked to about what my dream job would be, what my dream juggle would be. But I even talked to like moms at my kids' activities, or sometimes you'd get into conversation with somebody in line at the grocery store. Like I really started getting more comfortable talking about what I wanted to do and sort of putting it out there. And I remember one day, this one man that had connected me with this committee up in Edmonton with the Alberta government, he said, "I think I have the perfect job for you." And
Wow.
so, yeah, and actually, to be honest, every single job that I've had since leaving teaching, every single opportunity that I've had has not been something that I found on a job board or through a job posting. It's all been through conversation and connection. And this sounds kind of woo woo, but like just putting it out to the universe. That's how I've found every single opportunity that I've had. So I think that is such a big thing, is talking about it as a good first step, and using what you learn from those conversations to take action and take those small steps. Small steps can lead to big impact, right? Towards heading in the direction you'd like to go.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. I've done that before. Actually, all of my any consulting projects or whatever have been through word of mouth or through networks or whatever. So I love the fact that when you just talk about it and then the idea starts to come to life to yourself and to other people, and then doors start opening. And let's talk a little bit about COVID, because I feel like I need to mention it. How has that changed what you do as people are trying to juggle work and potentially homeschooling?
It's been very tough. So I think things that were tough before, in a lot of cases, just increased, right? Tenfold or more. My husband and I, in the spring when the world shut down, it was incredibly overwhelming. So I think the big things to do, because in some cases it's carrying on, right? Depending on where you're at, or the options available to you, and sort of the way you're navigating things. No matter which way, there's some big challenges happening. So I think the things that were helpful to us before are even more helpful now. So something that's been really helpful for my husband and I is just being even more intentional with time. You can call it time blocking or just designating times, because you can't really multitask effectively. So creating work time, school time, family time, like creating those blocks of time. Or maybe there are some work activities, for example, that you can do with your kids when they're around, and others where you really need that undivided time. So really looking at your day and creating some intention around your time. Because where I found like my anxiety level increasing, especially in the spring, was when I was trying to do work at a time when I really wasn't getting anything done. And so it just felt, I think, frustrating for everybody, and it wasn't ideal. If you can ask for help, I know it's tricky now with limitations in how we can interact with people, but maybe you have a cohort family or some people that are a part of your bubble that you can ask for support, like trading kids, or maybe letting your spouse or partner know that you need what you need, letting them know what you need to be able to get done what you need to do and have that time that you need. Because sometimes I think it's hard to ask for that help. I
For
had
sure.
to do that in the spring. I'm
Yeah.
like, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just not working. I need to get some help. And then, like, I know this is so cliche, but taking that time to take care of yourself and really making that a priority. If it's going for a walk by yourself, or reading a book for a little bit, or having a quiet cup of tea. It doesn't need to be big and elaborate, but something that you can do for yourself that can just fill your soul and renew your energy. Because I feel now more than ever, we're having to give so much of ourselves, and we can't do that. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? So we need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And then also to like giving yourself grace.
For sure.
And with that, maybe they're not as important now, right? Maybe we can kind of push that aside, or maybe we can outsource something, for example, right? Like get your groceries delivered instead of going to the store, or those, maybe order in a meal once a week or something like that if your family is comfortable with that. But just finding ways to just, give yourself a little bit of a break, I think is more important than ever right now.
Oh, that's all such great advice. I love it. Tick on every one of those things. Yeah, and I love the fact that you mentioned me time and just giving yourself some grace to not have it all perfect together, because I think that's when we get frustrated, is when we can't do it all. We want to do it all, but we can't do it all. So that's so important. Now, actually, can you tell us about your own mommy mess up? Is that what you call it? Mommy mess up?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let us in on
Oh,
your mommy mess up.
well, I have many, many, many. So, one from like a while back, I'll share a more distant one and a more recent one as well. But when I was getting gas one day at the gas station, it was the very first day of school. So my husband was back at work, and I had our youngest in the vehicle, and I filled up with gas, and I looked, and the door was locked and the keys were in the vehicle.
Oh,
Yes. And he absolutely couldn't get himself out of the seatbelt at the time because it was the 5-point harness. And I was trying to get him to reach with his toes and unlock the door, and he couldn't do that. I ended up having to phone my husband on his very first day of school to go home and get the keys and then come down and save me. But what I learned, because we have a friend who's a firefighter, is you can call like whatever the info number is in your city, and they can get a cold fire truck, like no lights and sirens, to come and open your vehicle for you, which is good to know, because if it was a really hot day or a really cold day, that could be a safety issue. Granted, it would have been a little embarrassing, but I mean, it's good to know that there's something out there like that. I've never had to do that, like take advantage of that service, though. I learned my lesson. Now I'm always like, keys, where are the keys? Where are the keys? And our kids are bigger, but it never happened again. It never happened again. And then I think more recently, as I said, like our kids are feeling a lot of emotions these days. And I think it's sort of in general. I think because like our kids are back at school and my husband's back at work and I'm working, in some ways it kind of feels like we're back to normal, but we're not. And when we were in the thick of COVID, I was making a point of alternating with our 3 kids, taking them for a walk each evening. So one at a time, so that they could just talk about how they're feeling about things without everybody else around if they wanted. And we had some big emotions at our house that I won't get specific about, but it really reminded me that even though things are more normal than they are now, it really reminded me of how important it is that I create that time for our kids, for one-on-one, and just an opportunity for them to not just tell me about their day, but to really talk about things if they need to. So there may or may not be something going on, but I think having that alone time. So, days are busy and things are crazy, but and it's not that it needs to be like an hour-long conversation, but I think just finding a time and place, like that little checklist in the back of my head about having that private check-in with each of them each day, because it's tough. Like they're pretty resilient. They're quite resilient, but I think there's lots of feelings and emotions. And in general, right, it's a good thing to do. So I need to be better at keeping that up.
oh, thank you for sharing that. That's another great reminder for me anyway. Thank you. Thank you for those mommy mess up stories. I love it. They're not really too bad. I didn't think you messed up.
Well,
We've all done it. We've
there's
all left the
many
keys in the car.
more. There's many more.
Yeah. So, can you just tell us like what you're most excited about and what's coming up for you?
I'm super excited about the course that I'm creating. Actually, I've created courses before for other people, but it's exciting that this is something that I'm creating for myself and my community. So I'm really excited about that. That's been really lighting my soul on fire and getting me excited about having that come out in the world. So that's sort of the newest thing. And then just continuing to grow my podcast has been fantastic. When I started it in February, as you know, when you start anything new, you're not sure exactly how it's all going to go and how it's going to work out, but it's been going really well, and it makes me excited to continue having conversations and learning myself, right? That's the big thing is I learned so much in having these conversations with other moms as well. It's been great.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I love it. Like, it's partly selfish that I get to have all these amazing conversations with all these interesting people. So, yeah, that's awesome. And congratulations on your course coming up. I can't wait to see it. I know a little bit about it, and it sounds super exciting. And is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners, and tell us how they can find you and your podcast?
The big message that I always like to share, and it's the one that I wish somebody would have told me or whispered in my ear, or we would have gone for a walk and they would have shared with me when I was a new mom, is like, there is really no one right way or best way or only way to juggle motherhood and work. But like, find that way that works best for you and your family. So I think that's the message that I would love to share. And if anybody would like to find out more about the Part-Time Jungle, you can find me at theparttimejungle.com. I'm mainly on Instagram at Part-Time Jungle. And my podcast is the Part-Time Jungle Podcast.
Good to keep it all consistent. That's awesome.
I'm trying.
Well, thank you so much for your time, for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm sure our listeners can tell that just listening to you and your podcast is just like a warm hug on a murky day or whatever it is, when you just need that pat in the back to say, keep going. You're not alone. We're in it together. And so I love listening to your show for that reason. It's just such a pleasure to listen to you and to all of your guests. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and support and all of the stuff today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to connect and chat with you.
Thank you for listening to the Productpreneur Podcast. If you loved this episode, we'd be so grateful if you could take a sec to subscribe, share it, and review it on Apple Podcasts. Your review will help more women build their own dream product business. By the way, if you have any feedback, comments, or questions, email me at info@nicoledelarzac.com. Until next time, keep dreaming up those product ideas.